You're listening to a very special Psych with Mike, the 150th episode. If you enjoy the show, please share it with a friend. To comment, to be a guest, or to send us questions, contact us through psychwithmike.com. And now, here's Psych with Mike. So did you get the show anything nice?
Just my attention.
Because you know this is the show's birthday. Well, technically not a birthday. It's the 150th episode.
It's a milestone.
That's correct, a milestone.
Yeah.
I got the show something nice. I got the show some new software for editing the video. Yeah.
Well, then the show should be happy.
It's very happy.
Good. I like for it to be happy.
Hi.
What do you say after you say hello?
How are you?
No, wrong answer. That's a book by Eric Berne, who is the founder of Transactional Analysis.
Well, let's do the actual introduction.
Okay.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I'm here with Brett Newcomb.
That's not your wife in the background, is it?
That is my daughter's doggy, who is staying with me. Yeah. So he may be a part of
participating.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know any better.
He just likes to be heard.
Don't we all?
Yeah, exactly. So, and in this day of COVID, I think we're all getting used to the fact that our kids and our dogs and our significant others are all running around in the background, and it's just kind of become how we do business.
And hopefully they all have sweatpants on.
Hopefully. Some kind of pants. Not to put too fine a point on it, but this is officially our 150th episode, which technically isn't a full 3 years because we put out an episode every week.
Damn close.
It's damn close.
Yeah.
And we've actually put out sometimes episodes.
Because we have so much to say.
More than, during the pandemic, we were trying to do some pandemic stuff also, not knowing in the beginning how long that was going to last. So technically, the official third anniversary wouldn't be until October, but we're hitting 150 episodes a little bit before that.
Wow.
And, just so everybody knows, I keep saying this, and people act like that they don't get it or they don't believe it, and maybe they don't, but we do this completely unscripted. We've done 150 shows. We've never had anything more than an idea, and we just run with that.
And that's supposed to be good.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Although I'm not going to tell you this, but I've actually been secretly saving some of your artwork, and at some point I'm going to ask you if you would be okay if we did a show about your artwork and showed it.
So
for people who don't know, if you're watching this on the YouTubes and you see Brett over there feverishly writing notes, he's actually drawing little captions.
Yeah, just doodling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a whole psychology for interpretation of doodles.
There is.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough about that. I'm really excited about the 150th show. When we started this, I didn't know where this was going to go. I don't think you had an idea about where this was going to go. I figured that we would do this for 6 months and we would both get tired of it, and that would be the end of it. And so the fact that we've been able to be doing it for 3 years and that we've actually seen it become something that I think is gaining an audience just is so incredibly flattering. And
it absolutely is.
Yeah. So, but today we wanted to revisit an issue. So I want to say whenever we have a conversation, we need to revisit that.
Yes, you are.
And we recently did an episode on transactional analysis that has gotten a lot of hits and has gotten some responses to. So when we did that show, I said that I wanted to go back and talk about the Thomas Harris book, I'm Okay, You're Okay. And so I sent you some information about that. And I think that you found that interesting. And so we wanted to talk some more about that.
My understanding is all of that derives from a theory developed by Eric Berne. And he wrote a number of books. I thought he had written I'm Okay, You're Okay. You said it was someone else. But it was that title came out of some of the dialogue that Berne wrote about. Berne's game theory was that most people play games with each other as a way of avoiding intimacy, but looking as if they're being interactive. And he says that whenever two gamers encounter one another, they recognize one another because they begin this delicate little dance of, do you want to play this game? Do you want to play that game? Do you want to play this game? Do you want to play that game? Because, by definition, whoever suggests the game that is played is the winner, ultimately, because of the scripting that goes on in the games. And so if I agree to play to a game that you suggest, then I'm going to lose. So why would I do that? Why would I do that? And the answer is because you get a payoff from just playing the game. It allows you to act as if and appear as if you have a relationship and you have an interactive reciprocity that's going on. And you do, but the relationship requires you to be the loser. But then why would you do that? It's because you know that the next time you and the player play, it'll be your turn to win, and you'll get to pick the game, and he, by definition, or she, will become the loser.
And strokes was
strokes are the
term
payoffs
that Berne used.
Yeah. So he said if you make like a chess game, if you make a move that you take a piece off the board, that would be a stroke. So if I'm playing one of these games, and his book, Games People Play, is the foundational book that I'm aware of. And he, in the first part of the book, he explains the theory behind his thinking, what he thinks people are doing, why he thinks they're doing it. And in the second part of the book, he identifies about 150 different games that he has found and described. So he can tell you that this is the initiator, this is the respondent. He calls them white and black. And the winner is always white, the loser is always black, the initiator is always white, the respondent's always black, at least in the beginning. But then it's move, counter move, stroke, counter stroke, and you go through the game and you get a payoff, you get satisfaction, you get resolution, and you get a fix. It's almost like an addiction. But it's not intimacy, and it's not relationship.
Right. It's a facade of those things.
Yes.
And that we agree to the facade because the reality of trying to engage in those things is so anxiety inducing that it's easier to engage in the facade than it is to actually do the work to becoming truly engaged.
And it's easy to go through the motions. I mean, when I was teaching high school, I used to teach about this because I taught high school psychology, and this was one of the units that we did. And I would talk to kids about stroking, and depending on your relationship to somebody, or you're assumptive, if it's somebody new that you haven't met, you assume a level of stroking reciprocity. So if you have a two-stroke relationship, one stroke is I see you in the hallway and I go hi, and you look at me, make eye contact, and go hi. A four-stroke relationship would be hi, how are you? Fine. Five would be how are you? Fine. How are you? How many strokes are given or gotten, and to what end? And what I would tell those kids in high school is most of the time when you say, oh, hi, how are you? Nobody wants to know the answer. They're not interested in the answer. They're just given the stroke because they think it's due for the quality or level of the relationship. And the more supposed intimacy that you have, the greater the connection that you have to this other individual, the more strokes that go back and forth. So if you meet somebody in the mall, if you walk in the mall and you've made 4 or 5 loops and you've seen somebody 3 or 4 times and you pass them one time, then you may say something like, hey, we need to stop meeting like this. People will talk. And then they look at you and they're flustered or whatever. They go, yeah, that's right. Or that's just stroke, according to Berne. That you don't know that person, you don't have a relationship with that person, but at least you had a contact, you had an engagement of some kind.
And so do you think that because we tend to shy away from engaging in true intimacy,
Yes.
it makes it easier
Yes.
to feel that intimacy with a person we don't know?
The illusion
because
of
the illusion
connection.
of it, right, becomes the intimacy becomes a substitute for the actual intimacy itself.
Absolutely. And in casual relationships, that's great. It allows you not to go, who stinks? But in a connected relationship, like husband-wife, father-son, employer-employee, where there are multiple layers of connectivity, then this gets in the way because you don't have truly intimate conversations if you fall into gamesmanship. I knew you were going to say that. You always say that. Why do you always say that? And then you chase that rabbit. I don't always say it. Yes, you do. Well, no, I don't. Well, I remember these 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. Well, those were different. And so you get these ritualized arguments where people say the same thing they've always said. And it's, as Byrne would call it, stroke, 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 stroke.
Right.
And nobody's making any movement. Nobody's making any resolution. Nobody's having any intimate connection.
So let's go to our break, and when we come back, we'll pick this up on the other side.
All right.
Hey, Brett, I heard you have a great face for audiobooks.
I had an opportunity to read a book that's out or will be out soon on audiobooks. But it was a book that I had written or co-written with Dr. Kathy Maupin. And it was a good time. We had a great time, and I think it's going to be good.
And the name of the book?
Got Testosterone.
And available where?
On Amazon and audiobooks when it comes out. Not yet, but soon, in the summer.
I'm very envious.
Well, that's called audiobook envy.
If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. So, Byrne was a professor at the University of Chicago, I want to say, but I'm not sure that that's true, so don't quote me on that. And Thomas Harris, was his student. And so Byrne wrote Games People Play in 64, somewhere around then, and it got really, really, really popular. And
well, there are multiple iterations of that are out that he didn't necessarily write, but Games Alcoholics Play, Games Teenagers Play, Games Parents Play.
But the original Games People Play was written by Eric Byrne, and it became wildly popular. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for 100 weeks.
Yeah.
And so then Thomas Harris came along, and he just thought, okay, Eric Byrne took the ideas of analytic psychology promoted by Sigmund Freud and really reduced them into a vernacular that people could understand. And the reason is because he took the ego states that were promoted by Freud as id, ego, superego, and talked about the child, the adult, and the parent. And what we understand as the child, the adult, and the parent would equate to Freud's id, ego, superego.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so when we communicate with other people, we're always communicating from one of these ego states. And when we communicate in a complementary way, then we're communicating from a like ego state. So if I say to you, I see that you misplaced your razor because you've got stubble on your face, right? So that's a very childlike kind of thing. And if you respond to me, oh yeah, well, I never use a razor anyway. So as long as we're communicating from a like ego state, even if we're adults, even if we're older people, we can communicate from a childlike ego state. Most of the conversations we have should be and are adult to adult. But if you cross communicate, if I say to you something that's playful, like, oh, I see you misplaced your razor, and you say, what are you talking about? Well, why are you judging me? Right? So you're now sending me a critical parent message, and then that's a cross communication, and now I'm going to probably respond in kind. I'm going to respond as if I were the chastised child and say, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And so what Byrne was talking about is that people can actually dictate the conversation through the ways in which they communicate. When we cross-communicate, it requires the other person either A, to leave the conversation, or B, to fall into complementary patterns of communication.
Or C, move to try to switch
The game.
from adult to parent to
Yeah,
child,
right.
or to get the other person to switch from adult to parent to child. It happens a lot in marriage counseling. You get married couples that have a lot of emotional tension, animosity, anger, whatever, with each other, and they play these cross transactions all the time. And so the guy's driving, and the woman says, "You're too close to this car. I'm really scared. Would you not tailgate?" And he says, "Don't tell me how to drive." And she says, "I'm not telling you how to drive. I'm telling you I'm afraid." He says, "You're trying to tell me how to drive." So you have an adult who's saying, "I'm afraid something that's going on here is making me uncomfortable. Can you hear that? Will you respond to that?" And you have the child saying, "Yeah." So that happens all the time. And when you try to point that out to married couples until they become familiar with the concepts, you're going to get one of them go, "Nuh-uh."
Right.
You don't know what you're doing. Why am I paying money for this? And that's the child.
And so then later,
Yeah.
in '69, Harris writes his book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, where he took the ego states and the communication patterns that were described by Byrne in Games People Play and put them into 4 categories, which are I'm okay, you're okay, I'm okay, you're not okay, I'm not okay, you're okay, and I'm not okay, you're not okay. And those are correlated with Mary Ainsworth, and John Bowlby's patterns of attachment styles. And we're not going to go, we don't have to go into, we can revisit that if we want to go into the connection with attachment
For our
theory.
300th
Right.
episode.
Exactly. But the point is that this became wildly popular. And so while the Burns book was on the New York Times bestseller list for 100 weeks, it never reached number 1. Thomas's book, Harris's book, almost immediately shot to number 1, but it only stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 70 weeks. And it kind of put, even though they were student and
Was he
professor,
okay with that?
I don't know. The word on the street
I was
is
okay with that.
Yeah, that they were afterwards in a kind of at least quiet adversarial kind of competition.
Sort of I'm okay, you're not okay.
Yeah. But when we think about this, I'm okay, you're okay, or I'm okay, you're not okay, it really helps us to conceptualize how individuals perceptually are engaging in those communication diets. So a diet is 2, and then a triad is 3. So if you and I are talking to each other, that's a dyad. But we're always trying to triangulate, at least perceptually, a triad because it relieves us of responsibility for the communication, right? So if you and I are communicating, we're always trying to find that triadic third partner, which is where Kaufman's drama triangle comes in. Right? Where you have the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim.
So all of these theories, to an aficionado, a professional, are fascinating. They are attempts to describe how professionals understand the makeup of relationships and the sense of self. I mean, if you go far enough back in the literature, you can read Martin Buber, I and Thou. We see the world that way, me and someone else. And then that person, those persons interact in some way. Somebody walks by that should ideally owe you 3 or 4 strokes because you live on the same street, you see each other every week, you take each other's garbage cans to the curb if somebody's not home. So I would expect that person wouldn't walk past me without acknowledging me on the street corner at the grocery store. And if they don't acknowledge me, then I'm wounded in some way because what's wrong? And I may feel like, well, I must have done something wrong. I must have offended them in some way. Or I may think, well, who in the hell is that? Who do they think they are? Because they're not, going back to Burns' theory, they're not doing the appropriate stroking for the level of relationship that we have.
But rather than actually address that person and say to them, what's wrong? It seems as though you are distracted. We construct all of these theories in our mind to explain this behavior that we think is unexpected.
Yeah. And then it brings you back to all these other names. You're talking about Bowlby, or you're talking about other theories to understand why would a person do that. And I think Burns simplified it. It's about the transaction. It's about the level or opportunity for relational connection. And it's about how we protect ourselves from the absence of that, and how we create an artificial sphere of interaction where there's no intimacy, because intimacy is a risk. If I'm going to try to have some level of intimacy with you, I'm going to have to take my mask off and let you see who I really am, how I really feel, what I really want. That's a risk, because you could reject me.
Right.
And I don't want to be rejected. So instead, I'll play the games. And when you and I are talking, and you go into one of these diatribes of listing names and facts and dates and times, and
which is something that you love so much.
And I say something to you like, don't build me a clock, just tell me what time it is, get to the point. Then that's, going back to Burns' theory, that would be my child trying to address your adult and say, come play with me. Let's be funny here. Let's be interactive. Let's laugh at each other, or let's jab each other. And your adult trying to say, well, no, can we elevate this to a more adult or intellectually based conversation? Can we talk about these names, these people, these theories? And it's an invitation to play. It's an invitation to say, do you, let's do one-upmanship. I know names you don't know. You know names I don't know. Or do you seriously want to have a conversation where there's an opportunity for learning, for growth, for connection? That all involves intimacy. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, are you available for intimacy in the relationship? Will you take your mask off? Will you not play games? Or are you a game player? And we learn to recognize the nonverbals that cue us when we're walking among strangers. It's like they wear little funny hats on their head. I'm a game player. I'm a game player. I'm a game player. I'm not. And then you go back to the triangle theory that you mentioned. I forgot whose name it was. Kaufman, thank you. The only way out of that, if you were raised in a drama triangle family, is to learn to say, no, I don't play.
Right.
I'm not going to play anymore.
Right.
And then everybody in the family is going to blame you for being the loser that you are. But you at least then become free of the dance.
Right. And so the benefit for anybody in these transactions is the stroke that you get.
Yeah.
And so if you are playing the game on a superficial level, then the stroke is also artificial and superficial.
Yeah, but you get a payoff.
But it still feels like a payoff, right? Right. I mean, it's like taking a drug to get a hit of dopamine. It's artificial, but you still get the payoff.
Yeah.
But when you talk about you and I, and that I go into the intellectual, sciencey stuff, and then you say,
or pseudo-intellectual, pseudoscience.
Well, okay. And then you do the thing where you say, "Hey, build me a clock. Don't tell me the time, or tell me the time. Don't build me a clock." You and I don't get offended by that because we exist in a relationship where we do take off our masks and we do show each other truly who we are, and where we do share some intimacy. So there's not the risk of, oh, you might reject me. And so we can have those kinds of...
If I was going to reject you, I would have done it 30 years ago.
30 years ago, yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that, if people really try and go to a deeper level and be willing to take the mask off, do you risk rejection? Absolutely.
Well, yeah. Or you can always listen to Stuart Smalley and say, by golly, people like me.
And that was Brett whacking the mic. But what happens if you don't get rejected?
That's the risk.
Exactly. Well, and for some people, it might actually be scarier to not get rejected than to get rejected.
Well, because then you'll have performance anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you might feel the need to take that mask off more often, or even leave the mask off. And I think that's really, really difficult for people to wrap their head around.
So then, if you go back to, and I know we're wrapping this up, but there's always the sidebar issue of if you have internalized a script that defines you, your sense of self. This is who I am in the world. This is what I'm like. If that's a mask and you take that off, you aren't going to know who you are.
Yeah.
You're not going to know how to perform, what's expected of you, how are you supposed to be in a conversation or a situation. And that's really frightening because somebody takes the anchor away from you, your script. And working in therapy with clients, one of the things that we regularly talk about is this is a script that was written for you by others, your parents, your boss, your teacher, whoever. This says this is the way you're supposed to behave. If you don't like that script, you could actually write a different one.
Right.
And that terrifies them.
Yeah. Trying to ask someone to think about, even just think about, conceptualize being the author of their own script is incredibly anxiety.
You read about alcoholism. In the alcoholic family, there are roles that you're assigned. You're supposed to play. You're like the family clown, or the savior. And everybody in the family expects you to fulfill that role. You need to say your lines. And if you say, no, I'm not going to do that, then the family potentially will reject you, and then you'll be alone. And that's a frightening place to be.
I mean, I think that's what it all comes down to, right? Is for human beings.
Fear of aloneness.
Yeah. Or fear of being with the self.
Yeah.
Because, truly, ideally for perfect mental health, the goal would be that you could be alone with yourself, which means you would not technically be alone. You'd have yourself. But I think that is what is perceptually frightening to a lot of people.
I don't want to worry. I just want to be happy.
Yeah. Don't worry. Be happy.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So, again, to revisit our 150th episode, and we're really asking for people to give us some feedback, share the show with a couple of others. Let us know what you like about the show. Let us know how you would like to see the show be different, added to, or subtracted from. I'm really open to hearing any feedback from anybody who would like to offer it. And as always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.
In the field of psychology, self-help, or whatever.
Whatever. I mean, if they want to hear from astronauts, I'll call NASA. I mean, if that's what people... now, obviously, you and I... primarily, our roots are in psychology. We've done psychology. We've taught psychology.
And education. Yeah.
And education, right. Yeah. And so, no matter what we do, that's still going to be a part of who we are. And even if we were interviewing an astronaut, we'd obviously be looking at that from a psychological
We say the St. Louis thing, where'd you go to high school?
Yeah.